Alrighty, and welcome to Fofa News. I am going to be bringing you an interesting interview today. I am Jakkanadar, and with me I'm having my good friend Nevin Gussack, who I was introduced to probably about 2 years ago now. He is a civic nationalist, and he is somebody who I have talked to on multiple occasions and realized that despite my communist principles and his anti-communist nature, he and I share far more in common than most people would ever vain to guess. So I felt this interview would be very useful to our audience to show that the right and the left are kind of unified on this. This administration doesn't support our people. And these people that are supporting this administration absolutely view both people like Nevin and myself as the enemy, despite the fact that traditionally he would be more on their side. So, Nevin, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing terrific. And I don't know if you knew this, Jack, or you got to my essays on Trump, but actually, I was an active Trump supporter. And on certain conservative programs, I gave qualified but yet strong praise to Trump's campaign and what he represented, or I thought he represented in 2015 and 2016 on the America Survival Roku TV of Cliff Kincaid, for example, and other interview venues. So, yeah, I am count me also as a highly disillusioned former Trump supporter because I thought he would express, based on his public statements, a radical civic nationalist vision. And we have Trump and the current iteration of MAGA from 2017 onwards represents much of what I oppose. It's basically an edgy form of Reaganism.
Oh,
So
it's Reaganism hyper caffeinated and steroided. Yeah, I am complete agreement on that one. It's just it's interesting. First of all, I didn't get that far into your Substack, and I didn't know that you had previously supported the Tangerine Tyrant. But and I'll give you shit for that later. At least you saw the light. More my issue
very
with
early
this
on, I
is
saw the light.
uh, more my issue with this is you and I are older. How did you fall for that when you had to have seen Trump in the 80s when he ran as a Democrat? And then again later in the early 90s when he ran as a Reform Party. AKA, for those of you in the audience who are too young to remember this, the American Reform Party was essentially our communist party for a short time. It didn't last very long, but he actually ran for them. So it's how did you not see that he was just using the most current line of rhetoric that made him popular?
Well, I mean, during 2015, 2016, I had my concerns about him. It even crept up in some of my interviews, like his business dealings with the Russians and even the communist Chinese. Um, so I had concerns about that. There was some of the rhetoric, overheated rhetoric, that I didn't care for, but I kind of thought that, okay, he's trying to play to different factions of the Republican Party. I saw how conservative incorporated, like Glenn Beck, Mark Levin, and others, Jonah Goldberg of National Review, how they were really giving him a lot of shit. They were viewing him as common sense statism, to quote Jonah Goldberg. And by then, I was very disillusioned with the Republican Party for years and years and years, and conservatism and Reaganomics. And all the other candidates were Republican candidates were terrible from my economic point of view. They were hypocritical on national security. They would uh, cite quite correctly the threats of Russia and China. But yet, when you take a look under the hood of that car, you'll find that they were the staunchest advocates of trade with China and Russia. Scott Walker, who was a candidate, wore the flag pin conjoined of the flags of the People's Republic of China and the United States. And then I saw Hillary Clinton, and by then I knew that Clinton was basically also an advocate of Reaganomics and foreign policy views that I strongly disagreed with a tremendous amount of corruption. And then it felt I didn't have anybody left. And I figured Trump had the sovereignty, since he was at the time largely self financing, that he could basically do whatever he wanted. So I chose Donald Trump. I saw him in Boca
I will
Raton,
do
Florida.
I will do a minor correction. They say he was self financing. At the time he was self financing, we now know he was $344 million in debt and was 100% reliant on campaign donations.
Right. And I found that later too. That's why I said at the time I felt that he was self-financing. And he said a lot of things that were good. Drain the swamp, since that, of course, that's been reinvented like 20 times to fit conservative incorporated priorities. Drain the swamp meant free the government of Wall Street influence, for example. There were a lot of things I agreed with. There were things where he said, even long before he was president, he talked about his support for gay rights, anti-racism. He mentioned in 1999 that the far right and the far left don't seem to be getting it correct. We need something more in the center, is what he strongly implied. So that appealed to me.
Mhm.
And I saw the furious reaction from the Reaganite right. He was never part of the tanky left or the Democratic Socialists of America type of left. So I thought, here's somebody who is highly imperfect, problematic for sure, but better than who was running at the time. And I
And as
immediately,
somebody who hated Clinton, I'll be
yeah,
honest with you. At first, I was like, "Oh, this is a joke," but yeah, I am not a fan of Clinton. I was not a fan of her husband. As much as a lot of people on the left like to point out, "Oh, he gave us a surplus and all this," and I'm like, "Yeah, but he repealed Glass-Steagall and stabbed us in the back on the way out the
thank
door and
you.
fucked us for generations."
Thank
Um,
you.
and his wife was absolutely probably the most amoral person I'd ever fucking met. I've physically met Hillary in person. She is just an amoral person. She was just the better option of the two we had because I knew what Trump was. And the reason I knew what Trump was is nobody switches from left to right to center to communist, literally to communist, to reform party. In this, that's not somebody with any ideals. That's somebody who's chasing an audience. And I saw that right away. And the reason I saw that is because Trump was always a showman, but he was never a good one. He was
No, he wasn't. At my, oh, go ahead.
he just always gave the plot away. He could never hold the smile long enough to get off camera.
Yeah, my stepdad, he for decades, like his father, worked in the building supply, building materials, and especially lumber industries in Brooklyn and Queens and Nassau and part of Suffolk County and Long Island. That's where I'm from, Long Island, New York originally. And he would relate from his customers who were businesses that basically Trump would do business with his company, the companies that my stepfather dealt with, and they would just not pay him back, which I know is well known, but this came from my stepfather's lips when I spoke to him. And my stepdad is a lifelong Republican. He's more of a Republican like I am, very much an old school guy. I mean, he's like 83 now. So to give you an
Yeah,
idea, he was born in 1940, April of 1940. So it's a different kind of Republican, the one that frankly appeals to me more. And he did not like the direction of the Republican Party, and he was hardcore anti-communist. I mean, he was the one who brought my sister and I in 1984 when it came out to the movie Red Dawn, which I love. It's one of my many favorite movies. Um, and he's that type of person. And he started voting Democrat once Trump started to run for president 2015, 2016. He did not want to vote for Trump. He thought that Trump was dangerous and, based on his personal business experience, extremely corrupt and crooked. My view on Trump is that he's completely immoral, uh, that he's opportunistic essentially, and that was deeply disappointing in blackbilling. I mean, look, are there things I agree with his administration? Sure. 25% maybe I agree with, but the other 75% was so god awful, I just could not vote for him again. So I would vote third party, I would vote Democrat, because he now is the vessel for Project 2025, which is basically, in essence, the end goal of that kind of Reaganomics on steroids. Uh,
Oh, have you actually read through
it's
all of
similar.
P20? Have you actually read through all of Project 2025? Because
Yes, I've read through parts of it. It is basically functionally a 21st century version of the Gilded Age. It's very contradictory on its trade policy. You look at the board of advisors, there's only about five people that I really like Orrin Cass, and I think one or two sort of more protectionist and quote pro-labor outfits from a conservative perspective. But they also had horrible people on board, notably Richard Hanania. If you've ever read his
yeah,
tweets, sure, there are some surface agreements I have with
I've
him.
spoken to Richard. He's a piece of work. He won't remember me, but yeah, he and I have actually spoken in person in New York. He's a piece of shit. I'm well aware.
Well, I hate his positions on unions. His positions on unions are he is, he likes to have this now muscular foreign policy, but yet he doesn't want to have, he's totally blind to the fact that about deindustrialization and free trade. He is okay, very supportive of outsourcing and free trade and all the rest of it. And yet he wants to support Ukraine and have a strong stand against Russia and China, even though at one time he was Russia and pro China. And that for whatever reason he made a switch, a big switch. You have to
It was
have
the money.
an,
He had no principles.
yeah,
Hanania
I
goes
think
whoever
it's
with
bad
whoever pays
leadership.
him. Yeah, he goes with whoever pays him the most money. That's really what it
Well,
boils down
well,
to.
there's been investigations and articles written where he has gotten money. Tyler Cowen's, or Cowen,
Yeah,
Cowen, big time, quote unquote, libertarian. Is also kind of a proponent of this quote libertarian dystopia. I don't know if you're familiar with it. He is funded by Tyler Cowen as well as also some trusts. Some trusts from unidentified wealthy individuals. And I think he gets money from some wealthy porn producer or something or another. I
yeah, and
forget.
there was a few people back when he was first getting started from my neck of the woods who gave him. He will literally take money from whoever will give him money and stab them in the back when it's convenient. It's literally how he functions. You can track this by the key example I use for him. Track his trans takes. You will literally
Yes.
watch a distinct shift on the day he started getting paid by the other people. When all of a sudden everything about his rhetoric went to the other side in an instant, and he never, ever explained why.
And the thing is this is where, from my point of view, our geopolitical adversaries are very aware of Hanania and how they're the types that are like Hanania. Yuri
And
Bezmenov.
Kushner, they're easily influenceable. as
Exactly.
as they have been quoted saying, like, we have literal newspaper reports of foreign governments talking about these people as easily influenced to help affect our politics in their public newspaper. This isn't some secret document we got smuggled out to. This is what they put in their newspapers. People, they aren't even trying to hide that they're doing this. It,
Exactly. Exactly. There's no question about it. There was an interview with Yuri Bezmenov, who I'm sure you're familiar with who he was. He was a Soviet defector. He worked for Novosti. He was stationed in India. He was trained at the Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow and sent to the Third World, rubbed shoulders with a lot of fellow KGB agents and collaborators, and he had this to say, and they knew uh, these people, and definitely want to read this to you because I think it's important. Bezmenov said in an interview um, about the left versus the conservatives. He says, yes, they were idealistically minded leftists who made several visits to the USSR, and yet the KGB decided that come revolution or drastic changes in political structure of India, they will have to go. G.R. Griffin said, why is that? Bezmenov said, because they know too much, simply because you see the useful idiots, the leftists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of Soviet socialist, whatever system, when they get disillusioned, they're worst enemies. That's why my KGB instructor specifically made the point, never bother with leftists. Forget about these political prostitutes. Aim higher. This was my instruction. Try to get into large circulation, established conservative media. Reach filthy rich movie makers, intellectual, academic circles. Cynical, egocentric people who can look into your eyes with expression and tell you a lie. These are the most recruitable people, people who lack moral principles, who are either too greedy or suffer from self importance. They feel they matter a lot. These are the people who KGB wanted very much to recruit. So that's the people like Hanania. So
And for those of you
people a
who
lot
don't know,
smarter.
for those of you in the audience who don't know this, the same person who trained Bezmenov is one of the people who trained under the same tutelage as the person who trained our uh, illustrious dickhead in Moscow currently, Putin. They literally trained under one of the same training officers.
Yeah, they study us. They have whole institutions like the Institute of the USA in Canada. And they realize, I mean, a Soviet textbook said in 1976 that the US Chamber of Commerce basically controls politics. And that was, of course, the year that the Supreme Court passed Buckley versus Vallejo, which started the process of legalizing copious amounts of money in political speech. And so people like Hanania, these people stick out like a sore thumb and they can sniff them a mile away and they exploit them. And the thing is that our geopolitical adversaries understand the doorways into free society is through our plutocracy. And this is one of the most blackpilling things that I don't want to say turn me against capitalism and private enterprise, but full stop. But it made what was many things that made me rethink all of my core political ideology, which at one time, a long time, economically libertarian. And it was that, as well as also listening and reading the tweets of Hanania and many others, coming into contact with some wealthy conservatives down here in Florida, like Tom Paterno, who is a elected official in the
Yeah,
town of Tequesta. Oh,
I used to work at Jupiter Hills Country Club when I lived down there. So if you know where,
so you know him.
yes, I have dealt with him on several occasions when he came to schmooze with the billionaires I used to work for. Yes.
Okay, bro. Oh my God. Okay, so let me tell you a story. Blackpilling. Okay, it turned me off. I was so pissed. Okay. Oh my God. Man, we're gonna have a lot of conversations. So Tom Paterno came when I was involved with the Coalition for a Prosperous America, which is an anti-free trade, transpartisan group. A lot of wealthy business people, good wealthy people. I really like them a lot, and labor people and everything else, conservative, liberal, the whole nine yards. So we showed the documentary, which was produced by Greg Autry and Peter Navarro, called Death by China. And we reached out to Tea
Navarro,
Party
Jesus
people.
Christ. Sorry,
So
sorry, you brought up Navarro. That
I know.
fucking scam artist. Sorry, go on.
So he came, Paterno came, and he stood up and said, look, I'm in politics. I'm not going to say who I am. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what a
Wait a
fuck.
minute. Wait a minute. Tom did not want to fucking press his bona fides. That's a first in my experience with him. That
Well,
motherfucker couldn't help but
he
brag
said
when he
that
was
I
around
am
me.
what he has said I am wealthy. He did say that. He said I'm from Pennsylvania, and it was the unions that killed the steel industry in my native Pennsylvania, and I don't actually be, but I want to give back. I'm not going to mention my. And the problem is that too many Americans are lazy. Basically, said he didn't use the word, but he implied it strongly. And people need to hustle and they need to work harder and work 3 jobs and everything. And I'm thinking, and I politely responded. I was so apoplectic in rage, and I said, in so many words, I'm like, look, there was labor industry cooperation in the 1980s where unions and industrialists who were anti-union in the steel industry at the time in the 1980s and 1990s created groups like LICIT, LICIT, Labor Industry Cooperation on Trade. And they were
Well, and
big
on
in
top of that, they also helped fund like widows' funds that they were not obligated. Like they did, like this was back when we had capitalists who actually understood that you don't get money without labor, and you can't freaking treat your labor like shit. Like
yeah.
they actually understood this, and they started to fix it. And then we got into, I'd say, you blame Reagan, I blame LBJ. We get into quarterly thinking. We get into,
Right.
and you'll,
Well,
if you, the next time you talk to Rich, even ask him how often I bitch every time he brings up a quarterly earnings report, because I despise a quarterly earnings report because it's short-sighted. It is literally training our brain to bring the scale so far down that we miss the forest for the trees. And I blame that on LBJ because of his anti-union rhetoric. Reagan just cemented it, is really the why he gets the blame for it. And I'll blame Reagan for a lot, but this one didn't get started by him. It was started before him.
so getting back
And
on
yeah, go ahead.
getting back on Paterno, because this is important, because that was one of the many black killing events for me about conservatism. And we shook hands. He was very pleasant and polite. How I found out his name is I looked up on the electronic sign up sheets, and I saw his name and I Googled it and I made a connection. So in my last Substack essay on why I became disillusioned conservative, I actually mention him by name, what happened, this story, as well as in my book, Turning the Page, My Evolution from Conservatism to Radical Civic Nationalism, because I think it's an important statement because it showed that while he was very pleasant and cool, very nice, I really saw what kind of person he was, that if we have a Red Dawn situation in the United States, or if we have a social revolution or a collapse of the United States, these people will run and hide. They are cowards. They are pussies. They are concerned about their wealth. And a portion of them, as we talked about with Bezmenov and many other quotes and documents I can read till I'm blue in the face, these people, a portion of them will collaborate with our geopolitical adversaries. And
100%. And this is
you
coming
know,
from a communist saying this. 100%. That these are the people that people like Lenin, like Stalin, would have fucking killed to have on our side back then.
and they
They
did.
would
They
have.
had a lot of wealthy capitalists, and Hitler had them too as well.
Yeah,
On
but we didn't
his,
have as many here in the States that he could exploit at that time, which is what I mean. Like now, pretty much everybody in the CFO and up position is this.
yeah,
There's very
and
few who would be able to resist that temptation. Oop, silly puppy.
so
Messing with
I
the camera.
can't believe you know Tom Paterno. I mean, I don't want to beat the guy up to unfairly, but does this sound like your experience with him? I mean,
Yeah.
let's just talk ideas and not
Let's put it
personal. I
this
mean,
way. I worked with a guy. I worked for this family. I won't say their name, but just to give you an example, in Jupiter Hills Country Club, if you ever go in there and you go past the guardhouse, you make your first left, they're the first house on the left. This house has a 10,000 square foot pool deck of triavertine marble. That's their pool deck. You can imagine what the rest of the house is like if that's what they put outside. um, Paterno was knocking on their door, and I remember him talking to these people, the mom and her kids, because the adult kids, and trying to essentially get donations. And I remember looking at this woman's face, and I saw the color drain out of her face, and I remember what he had said at that point. He said, "I will work for you." And this person, he didn't realize this, was a wealthy person who did not like abuse people, etc. They got their wealth from like inheritance, and they had spent the majority of their life like helping the less fortunate with the wealth that had been accrued by their family in less than reputable means beforehand. Um, and she came to me afterwards. Now, mind you, I'm a chef at this point. I am literally a dude in a kitchen in whites. She didn't know I was political. She didn't know my political mind. And she goes, "That dude's a snake, and I will never trust another word out of his mouth. Any politician that says that he works for you and you've never seen him before is lying to you."
There you go. There you go. And these are the people that Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, Saddam Hussein, the Ayatollahs in Iran, they have these people marked out. And let's read another quote from the Islamic Republic of Iran. I mean, they just
Which year are we dealing with, Khomeini or Khomeini?
Khomeini. And
Okay.
this was Behzad Nabavi, who I believe who was the Iranian minister of heavy industries at the time. And he said very bluntly in 1985, those people in the West will put their own mothers on auction for profit, because there was a lot of embargo busting during the 1980s on both sides, including by the United States and many other Western countries, let alone the Eastern Bloc and China, with both countries as well. And they just know this. And this is one of the most black pilling things. And just until we get a grapple hold on the plutocracy and unbridled capitalism, the geopolitical threats to this country, our vulnerabilities will never go away. And from your point of view, there's an anti humanitarianism, which I also do not like about what has become of American capitalism. There's a total lack of empathy, and it's encouraged a political class that basically doesn't put any sense of public interest, let alone national interest. And I think Paterno, and I'm really glad we both know about it, but that we know him or dealt with him, I should say. It stems, I think, in part, and part of it, I hate to say, is embedded in our historical DNA in the US. And an example of that is the economist James Buchanan. And he is very much influential in conservative libertarian thought.
Oh,
And
he's
he
he's
claimed that
influenced on our side too, because he was one of those people. He didn't care about sides. He cared about right and wrong.
he claimed that, quote, there is certainly no measurable concept that could be called the public interest. The public interest in the politician's view does not exist. Buchanan made it, I'm reading from my Substack. Buchanan made it his life career to, quote, tear down the very concept of the public interest. And of course, I said it is what the late radio commentator and author Chuck Harder referred to as the I've Got Mine Club in his book, Will We Ever Learn? And actually, I'd been interviewed years ago on a program. It was one of the best voices on radio at the
Who
time.
was that? You for some reason Discord cut out there for a second.
That's okay.
It's been
Chuck
cut. It's been.
Harder.
Oh, okay. Hardwood. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the situation with that. And Paterno is an example of that culture in action. And I think in America, look, wealthy people, I'm not trying to brag. I have family members on both sides of my family that have those types of houses. I mean, I'm not trying to brag. My dad, who has worked hard, he had help, but him and my stepmom worked as a really good team to build up a business, which now my brother has, and they got a shit ton of money, and they're good to their workers. And I'm going to brag about my family because I love. I mean, they had
We
exotex.
will we will disagree on like the propensity of wealth and things like that. But there's plenty of good people on all sides. Like, this is the part that I get on my side about. And for any of you on the left in the audience who are watching this, stop being this type of leftist. It makes you a fucking idiot. Um, they will immediately, oh, they're wealthy, they're evil. Am I going to sit here and say that your family is completely innocent of all wrongdoing to gain that wealth? No, because I know it's almost impossible for that to have happened. Did they intentionally harm people, though? Probably not. They probably didn't even realize that the harm down the chain was there until many, many, many years later, if ever, because that's intentionally insulated from them. That is something that our system does to allow for them to make for less ethical decisions. Not saying your family did specifically, but because we insulate them, they may not even realize the downstream effects until years after they make the decision. And you can't fix it at that point. You've already done the damage. Then all you can do is try to recuperate. And it seems like from what you're describing, your family did so. They took care of their workers, and that is in most cases the best we can expect from people who don't even realize the downstream harm.
Exactly. I mean, they were giving my brother, and look, I'm proud of my family. I love my family. I'm very loyal to them. And like my brother who took over the business, and my father and stepmother had him working in the factory floor since he was like freaking 13 and 14 years old, operating forklifts, consorting with the workers. That's the kind of capitalism and solidarity that I support. He was giving out $10, $30,000 checks to their veteran workers and managers from the office staff downward. I mean, that's
No, I'm with you, and that's why I don't want to attack your family and just point out that it will be almost unavoidable if they obtain the wealth that you were implying, that they did not cause harm somewhere. Did they do it intentionally is the difference, though. Because
I
I'm
don't
sure
believe
I've
so.
harmed people. Yeah, and that's the difference. I'm sure I've caused harm to people that I had no intention of harming. Does that make me an evil person? No. And I'm sure that all of these leftists who like to do the oh, they're wealthy, they're automatically evil shit, they don't realize they have done harm too, and they don't realize what harm they have done because it just hasn't come back to them yet. This is the same for wealthy people. You cannot blame them for every freaking evil in the world that is caused by wealth. Some of them have no fucking clue what you're talking about because they've literally never seen it, and they have been insulated from it. And not
And
by
this is
their choice either. That's the
and
other
this
thing. It's
is
not like they chose to be ostriches. But yeah, go on, please. And
well,
looks like we got about
this is
10 more minutes, so just to let you
yeah.
know on time.
Well, and this is where the Marxist Leninist left and the hardcore anti-American left, when they come to power, even the ones that are most if you're on the surface, puritanical. Oh, we won't work with the rich and we're going to kill them all. Well, let's take a country you're familiar with, Cambodia, under the Khmer Rouge. They wiped out the wealthy people, Stalinist Maoist purge. But and I know you probably know this, Jack, because you lived in Cambodia, I said, I've gone through the records, books that have published the Khmer Rouge documents, and they kept very good records.
Well,
They
some of the
they
time
had
they
a front
did.
they had a front corporation called the Ren Fung Corporation based in Hong Kong, and they were trading with capitalist countries faster than you can eat a hamburger
Oh
on
yeah,
your home.
brother number one was brother hypocrite 100%.
Yeah,
This is
or
no argument.
Albania under Enver Hoxha and Ramiz Alia. I mean,
Well,
they traded through.
Ceausescu did the same. Like we could do this all day. There's plenty of shitty leftists that I will gleefully beat over the head with you on this
Yeah,
because
so this,
they make my job harder. They make
yeah,
people like me look evil because of the shit that people associate with them and communism. And yeah, that's a
and,
whole
and,
longer
and I
conversation.
think you pinned it. It's the authoritarianism and what I term the theology of power that really turns me off. And I do disagree with also Karl Marx's view of the despotic inroads of private property. So I think you really hit the nerve on that. But I'm also from my side, coming from a right wing point of view, or my roots were very much in the right, we also have to learn to love our country, to quote, I forget the speaker at the last Democratic National Convention, but we also can't lie about it. And
Mhm.
this is the problem with the Paternos and the James Buchanans of the world. It is in our DNA, and we have to grapple it, and it is in our DNA. Let's take a look at some quotes, and then you'll comment, and we'll close and figure out another interview
Oh yeah,
conversation.
we will definitely be doing this again for those in the audience, because this is the difference that I think people have missed. Right and left work together far more often than a lot would like to believe, and a lot would like to project. And we need more of it, because this us versus them mentality, that it is very much making us guilty of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I'm going to say this, and there's going to be a lot of people in the audience who will hate this. All of you who refuse to vote for Harris because both Trump and Harris are going to be committing a genocide with Israel, you helped Trump do it faster. You helped Bibi do it faster. Because was Harris perfect? No. Would she have done this? Not on your life. And there's people on the right who are seeing that now going, holy shit, what did I do?
Yeah, and I wanted to, mention the quotes by founding father John Jay. He stated, "Those who own the country ought to govern it." And another founder, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, warned, "The people should have as little to do as may about the government. They lack information and are constantly liable to be misled." And, there might be some truth perhaps in that last statement, but what has rule by the super wealthy given this country from a
Mhm.
nationalist and even a regulated capitalist point of view? We've already talked about this. You have probably talked about it on your show. I've talked about it plenty of times. I've spent countless hours on the computer and in multiple academic libraries researching it. I'm sure you have, and have a lot of practical experience. And this is where I emphasize the term radical in my radical civic nationalism. That's why I put the term, because there needs to be, by today's standards, radical reformism, where we
Mhm.
recognize that people like John Jay and Roger Sherman were not entirely right, or actually very wrong in the case of John Jay. That just because you're super wealthy does not make you necessarily an upstanding citizen. There are plenty of
Or that you under here's the other point that they, and we have a term for this, and I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times in the recent years, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Just
yes,
because you're an expert on logistics does not mean that you're an expert on fucking farming. Just because you're
exactly.
an expert on a hedge fund does not mean you're an expert on biomedical. These are not always transferable levels of expertise, yet all too often those hyper wealthy think it is. They have the money, they make the decisions, they know what's right.
Exactly. So, that's where I'm at. And, this makes me kind of an unusual, I think, in politics. Look, I voted either Democrat or party. I have not voted for a Republican since 2016 for a variety of different reasons. And believe me, you look at my Substack, you look at my writings, there are plenty I'm very critical Democratic Party from both the right as well as a sort of populist, left populist position, still retaining a capitalist framework, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we're in a difficult position right now because voices like us are transpartisan. I can have a conversation about the actual reality of capitalism like we're having right now far easier with certain elements of the left than I do of the right. And I think we need I think we need to network more. And that's what I'm trying to do with my own project is network like minds and not so like minds who share certain basic fundamental values and life experience so that we can make a better country and by virtue of that a better world.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I a nationalist? Because I think people essentially are tribal.
Oh, 100%. We have
These
tens of thousands of years years of evolutionary history to overcome with that. You're 100% right.
You know,
Trying to not be tribalistic is a conscious choice you have to make. Yes.
yeah, this is our home. This is like a family.
Mhm.
And you love your family. You love your want to protect your home. You want to recognize that you might have problems in your home and you want to fix it so you can make it the most durable as possible. That's why I choose radical civic nationalism. It's not jingoistic. Uh, it's not jingoistic. It's certainly not fascistic or national socialist. But it's civic nationalism. It represents different races, sexual orientations, genders, social classes, religious groups, etc.
The term that we use on the left for this, and it will save you a lot of time in the future, intersection positions. That's what you're talking about, is intersectionality.
Yeah.
AKA, for all of you in the audience who hate it, it's critical race theory, y'all, that we're talking about here. Because that is actually a useful metric to use. It's not about beat. You and I are both white men, old white guys from America. Are you ashamed to be white? Or are you just
No,
ashamed of shit that people did in the past that happen to share our skin color?
I'm ashamed of bad elements in every racial group that have done
Yeah,
shitty things to our
yeah,
people and other peoples of the world.
yeah. People don't understand this, that critical race theory, done correctly, is what you and I are doing right here. This intersectional approach of, hey, this has been done to these people, and it was done by these other people. You don't have to be ashamed of what they did. You didn't do it. All we have to do now is work to fix it. We just have to recognize it. That's really what this is recognize it so we can fix it. We can't change the past. All we can change is steps forward.
So I'm going to ask you a question and we'll close out. Where do you think I stand on the political spectrum? What tradition do you think I come from? What is your feel based on whatever? I know you.
Original tradition. I would say you probably come from, and this is not meant as an insult, although it will slightly come across this one. The stereotypical New Englander, that how to put this, you were brought up in a dominionist home, and I don't mean, a lot of people when they view my theology content would absolutely view that as a negative aspect, but this is very common in New England because this is where, like, the primary hub of dominionism, religion, is within the country for a very long portion of our history, and in the process of that, it breeds in nationalism, and I don't mean this as a negative, because that kind of national pride is something that communists and socialists and, sock dems and everybody can feel about their country when their country's doing shit right. Um, and this is very big in New England and the Midwest, more specifically the tri-state area of Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. Um, we For those of you who may not understand the region I just put in, what I'm talking about is the Rust Belt, essentially, across New England. This is how a majority of people thought for 50 years, Nevin. The everybody can get the American dream. Everybody was a conservative to a point and democratic to a point, because you come from a time period where your parents were much like my parents. Either they didn't talk about politics, or they didn't talk negatively about other people's politics as heavily. They talked about policy. They talked about decisions that were being made. It wasn't, oh, this person is a Democrat, screw them. It was, oh, I don't like what this Democratic politician is suggesting. It was, oh, I don't like what this Republican politician is suggesting for this policy. That level of dominionism comes from the concept of, we are a country that had to fight for every right that we gained and every right that we established in the Bill of Rights. And it's really heavy through the Rust Belt because of the history there. Dominionism in this respect is more about national dominionism than theological dominionism.
Okay.
Because yeah, and this is why I
Because I was
said it.
born, I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so
I didn't know that, but this is why I say, it's why I said it would sound like an insult at first, but it's definitely not meant as one. Because this level of dominionism at this time, while it did lead to some pretty horrible outcomes in American history, it also led to us protecting ourselves from a quite authoritarian and despotic government within England, and laterally within France when they tried to do their bullshit. And for those of you who don't know about the French-American War, yeah, have fun with that. That's not usually taught in our history classes, and it should be. But this dominionism is very strong within this area, and it leads to a influx of pride. Now, I don't particularly like pride in this respect, because of the aspect that you and I will probably agree on. Pride usually leads to hubris, and hubris leads to shitty outcomes. But that level of pride was almost necessitated to form our country. If we had not had that pride, that level of self determination, that level of, wait a minute, you've promised us this, and now you're doing the exact opposite. Um, Level of fair mindedness in that dominionism, we would have never had the revolution that we had. And we would have not created the secular country that we did through that revolution. And so that dominionism, as much as I will attack it theologically, 100%, is not a bad thing on a nationalistic aspect. I just don't think it should warrant what you do, because you go to the nationalist side of it. For me, that pride is okay. This is decisions that our people made that made better outcomes. They also made some that we need to learn from that led to some pretty shitty outcomes. Trail of Tears, the genocide of multiple Native American tribes within the New England area, etc. Like, this was both good and bad, and we need to
Well,
remember
I
that.
refer
So
to them
that,
as not even tribes, as nations, because they were nations.
well,
And
some were nations, some were tribes, and I don't remember which ones were genocided. So I will say tribes to cover everybody, because not all were nations. And I know that people will find this offensive for me to say so. I have literally talked to Native American councils that will say the same thing.
mm,
It was different. And in fact, if you watch one of my videos, I mentioned Cahokia.
mhm.
Cahokia was a particular nation, or a city within a nation, I should say, of a Native American nation. That when we discovered it, when we first stepped foot onto American soil, and discovered this city, it was larger than London. Think about
Hmm.
that, Nevin.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. It's
At
interesting.
the time we discovered it, it had a greater population and covered more square mileage than London.
Hmm,
And they,
interesting.
through baskets, built a mountain. These were part of the mound builder nations of the East Coast.
Hmm,
There's multiple nations that did this. You being in Florida, unfortunately, the Seminoles, all of their mounds were destroyed. You can't visit too many of them outside of the Everglades.
right.
But they're all across the East Coast. There's a lot of them in Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, to northern Tennessee, etc. Um, they built a mountain that, if you were to calculate the volume, is roughly the same size as one of the smaller pyramids on the plateau of Giza.
Hmm. I'm not surprised, to be honest. It's interesting, but I'm not surprised because a number of these much more ancient nations and tribes um, engaged in a lot of these engineering feats and accomplishments, some of which
And
are very
we just
familiar to us and deserves our respect.
Yep, and we just paved over it and called them savages. And that dominionism, this is the bad side of it. We basically treated them as if they were unworthy of being called civilized by that dominionism. So there's good and bad to it, which is why a lot of people who watch me, or have listened to me talk on this on previous occasions, would immediately have taken that as an insult, which is why I prefaced it the way I did. Uh, Go ahead.
Yeah, that's why we have to build a better nation. That's why I quoted one of the former DNC speakers from the 2024 convention that loving your country doesn't mean lying about it. You have to recognize what your country has done that was horrifically wrong, that's maybe not talked enough about. And you have to build upon that too, as well. And build a better national community and whatnot. No country is without fault, without its black history, so to speak.
Mhm.
Name me a country. That's just denying reality. And
I
that's
can
what,
name you two, and that's only because they only came into actual existence within the last decade.
and that's
They
why,
haven't
yeah,
had long enough yet.
and that's why I don't choose jingoism. I mean, my major was history and political science. So a lot of that is evidence based. You can have your feelings and your biases, but also you have to weigh the evidence, even pay
Mm-hmm.
lip service to it, for God's sakes. And that's, one of the many things I don't like about MAGA. MAGA is false nationalism. And that, I think,
Oh,
maybe
it's populism.
it's not even populism, it's fake populism, because they misidentify who the elites are. That's the bigger
Okay.
issue.
No, well, I guess this is where you and I differ, because populism isn't always against who the elites, because populism is about the populace as a majority. If those elites and part of the populace are within alignment to the point where they can create critical mass, that is still a populist movement, not a nationalist movement. By
It might be
definition.
Yeah, it might be based in the masses, true, but in reality, it's populism, is my understanding, and we can talk about it next show because
Yeah.
we're getting near 10:30. Is all about suspicion of the elites, and in order to have an effective populism, as opposed to fake populism, and MAGA and Trump had become, especially in 2017 and afterwards, fake
Mm-hmm.
populism, because they misidentify the elites as academics, teachers, certain non-government organizations,
Certain government organizations.
government organizations like Doge. That's not populism. Elon Musk, and Jeffrey Yass and the other tech billionaires, when they were part of the MAGA coalition, that's not a populist coalition. Now, you can have wealthy people in your coalition, but they have to have the public interest at heart. You cannot have people like Elon Musk and others in your
and
administration
and here's
that
the thing, and a
basically
lot of
shit
people on the
all over
left will
poor people.
yeah, but here's the thing. A lot of people on the left will hate me for this. I honestly think that Elon thought he was doing good. He's a fucking idiot and he was wrong. But I honestly think he was doing good, which is why when he left the administration, we're now seeing the oh so public breakup of Trump, and him condemning a lot of the things that Trump is doing because he sees it now. He thought he was on the right side. He really did. I think he was deluding himself. Like, don't get it twisted. This isn't me defending any of the bullshit that he did, but I honestly believe, because of all the ketamine he's on, the disassociations that he was having, I truly think he was deluded into thinking he was doing the right thing. I think he thought he was doing real populism. He was wrong. He was 100% wrong, and he deluded himself because he created the echo chamber of X that he turned Twitter into. But I think he truly believed it. And the only reason I say that, his reaction since leaving, everyone's like, oh, he's just upset that the EV subsidies got canceled, or this or that, or that he got fired, or blah 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 blah, or that Besant punched him, or that Miller punched him, whatever fucking rumor they've landed on now. I honestly think he thought, delusional as it was, he was the person doing what you're claiming. I truly do. He was full of shit. He was lying to himself. He was lying to everybody else because of that. But I think he truly believed it, because his reaction since tells me this is an emotional reaction he was not ready for. Because we all know he's petulant, like, and petty. Like, anybody who's paid attention to him over the last decade knows that. But like, he has been like truly in like not introspective in a way that you would not have expected from him 10 days ago. And
Well,
to me,
I
go ahead.
think at our next show we can talk about Musk, because that's a whole long discussion unto itself. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
mean to be rude. I do have to wrap it up because I
yeah. I'm seeing
have
3 minutes on the clock. Yeah. 2 minutes
Yeah,
left.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry,
No,
but
no,
I
no.
think I think we could do this maybe Friday. I have off on Friday. I do have an interview from 9 to 10 scheduled with David K. Johnston. Um, and then maybe afterwards we can do maybe another hour.
Oh,
Um,
like honestly, and hopefully next time we could like schedule it where like Rich can be there and we could get the whole FOFA crew together, because that would be, I think that would be a lot of fun for us to go through, because they'll have a lot of different questions and I'll have for you. We actually technically got through 2 questions, but that's fine because they were rather important questions to go through, especially this early on in these kind of like interview series. Like how did you fall for Trump in 2016? When how did you see your way out of it? Those are really really important questions to answer. And as much as I will disagree with some of your points, I love the answers overall because they end up coming to the same conclusion I do. Better world equals better people, treating the people better overall, making sure that they are better cared for, and that at least our bare minimum is not starving people in the streets and homeless people in the woods.
oh God, no. God, no. One of the things I love my state of Florida in so many ways. The only thing I absolutely despise about Florida is the state government that we've had for most of the time I've been here since 1997. So, and the value and aspects of the values that they have. It's just dreadful, and the state
Yeah,
deserves better. So,
yeah, my mom's still down there in Florida, and she's a DeSantis lover, Trump lover, but I don't get it. I don't understand it. I cannot for the life of me grasp how she sees this and is okay with it. Because here's the thing, my mom was not a good person. Like, this isn't me like, oh, my mom's one. No, my mom wasn't a good person. But one thing I used to be able to say is my mom's not a racist. My mom's not a bigot. I'm not so sure anymore because she's cheering on things that I never in a million years would have thought that she would have cheered on. And condemning things that I never in a million years thought she would condemn, like expecting due process for a prisoner. How is that a condemnable position to hold? I'm not even saying, this was about Garcia. Um, let's say he is a criminal. Let's say he's everything that Trump campaign says he is. Okay, put him through the courts. Show your evidence. Let a jury fucking decide that, as we are, our laws say are required. Send him the fuck away if he's a criminal. I don't care. Like, you want to deport a criminal, that's on you. But don't fucking lie to us. Don't do the bullshit that you're doing and then say habeas corpus doesn't apply to somebody in the United States just because they're a non-citizen. That's not how the law works.
well, and that's correct. That's correct, and it also sets a bad and psychologically and image wise in the world too as well. My look, and we my two priorities, or maybe three priorities or more, with immigration is as follows: for to protect our national security, and obviously against us with criminals. Use the term off to use law and order. The other part is my issue with the immigration debate is the real culprits are not caught or punished.
No,
And
we're
that
punishing the
is
end
when you
user.
take a look at how these workers, immigrant workers, are coming. And since I started to date 6 months after my divorce, all I've dated are first generation immigrants. That's the nature of the demographics in Florida.
Yeah.
I like non-white women. I different cultures and the
You're
rest of
you're you're in South Florida. It's almost unavoidable. Yeah.
exactly. And I'm not racist. I'm the furthest thing from it, obviously. You just go on my Facebook page and look who I'm standing with
Well,
at a
let's
freaking
just put it this
telephone.
way, Nevin. If you had been a racist, you and I wouldn't have been having this conversation, and me be a smiling participant.
Yeah.
We would have been yelling more.
You just, if you know anything about my personal life, you know that the furthest thing from the case. But anyways, the other part is that you have elements of the wealthy classes that are magnets for undocumented as well as work visa employees from abroad.
Yep.
And it's a form of a labor arbitrage. Evidence on even today in Immokalee and other parts of Florida and even other states Read books like Tomatoland. I say this to the audience, and you really see that slave gulag labor conditions do exist in the United States.
Oh yeah,
And
I
that
can
is
point you to some right here in my state of Arkansas where we get 13-year-olds working in meatpacking plants cleaning hazardous
exactly
machinery.
where the Republicans, by the way, are loosening child
Oh
relations
no, no,
law.
we didn't loosen. We made
Arkansas
it
did it already. Yeah,
we made it illegal for them to even ask for proof of age.
exactly. That's I've read about
That's
that.
not loose. That's not even loosening it. We just fully opened it. We kicked that bitch open and knocked the door off the hinges.
And to me, this is where I would call for federal intervention to basically force that to basically overthrow that kind of legislation. And that's one of the curses of our country. We do have a love affair, a love hate affair with cheap labor, with
Yep.
bonded labor. And that needs to end too in order to create a more healthier, balanced form of capitalism and free government. And that's the biggest thing. You remember the Koch uh, poultry raids from the first Trump administration, you notice that the billionaire owner was not arrested. So the undocumented workers, the
He
illegal
was not even fined
workers,
directly. He was not even fined directly. The company was fined.
now under a radical civic nationalist administration, if you want to hear what would happen
Because
under my party, if it was governed by my values, which I believe many people share in varying degrees, many don't. But the owner of Koch Foods, Koch Poultry, would have been arrested in handcuffs, and that business would have been dissolved because I would have national corporate charters, and they would lose the charter, and then the business would be auctioned off to entrepreneurs who are more nationally minded and publicly minded. That's what would happen in my government because ultimately that protects the system of capitalism. It protects our its reputation and its image, and it also is doing the right thing by people, including the powerless individuals. So it's in everybody's interest with the policies that I'm recommending.
the
But
only part that I disagree with is the disillusionment and auction aspect. At that point, I would say, here's you are now under government oversight. You have X amount of weeks, days, months. Pick your poison. To fix this situation, we will be coming back at random intervals to inspect your progress over this probationary period. Because the thing is as much as I am not a capitalist, I'm not authoritarian either. So I don't want to take the free will of those other employees who may not have been even aware of what the CEO was doing, and or the board, I should say, because almost nothing's controlled by the CEO directly anymore. That they may not even have been aware of what the board was doing, and the board may have been voting against the actual interest of the shareholders, which you and I have seen
right, that's why
how
there
many
has to be
hundreds
an
of times. Yeah, yeah,
investigation. There
yeah.
has to be an investigation. I'm just putting it very briefly, and it's
hmm Yeah,
I
that was
just
the only thing I disagreed with was the disillusionment. Other than
yeah.
that, you and I
I
were in
mean,
complete agreement.
it still keeps it within the private sector, but the people responsible
Mm-hmm. Because
bottom line.
I'm for nationalizing things like the power grid and
Mhm.
water supply and the things that are necessity for life and therefore should not be commodified. I'm not so much for just nationalizing any business who happens to piss me off. Like
I'm,
that's getting
I'm
too close to
mostly
the communist side that you hate as much as I do.
I'm generally allergic to nationalization, but there are just certain for-profit businesses that are not predicated purely on selling a good product or service.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have to go. I don't mean to be
Yep.
rude. One
Nope.
area is health insurance, and I'll leave it at that.
Oh, no,
So,
no, you and I are in agreement, and the one I'll tack on is the prison system. Prison system should not be a profit-driven system. Not
I
if we
agree.
want to create better outcomes for our society. And I
There's
think,
no rhyme or reason for prison privatization at all.
yep.
And it's created a government corruption issue. And here's another politician also faced up to front and center. And I'll tell you the story next time. And that is Adam Hasner.
Never dealt with him directly, but I've had the displeasure of reading about him.
Yeah, he's a bad dude. Very corrupt. In my opinion, at least morally corrupt from my point of view. But I will save that story for. So I
Well, and on
appreciate
that
you
note,
having me.
well, and absolutely. And before we go, so please plug your Substack, and then I'll close out the interview. We'll definitely have to do this again, if not Friday, soon, because these are important conversations to have between the right and left. Because the people in Washington aren't right or left; they are just dictatorial assholes. They are fascists. This is not a right or left thing anymore. They don't care about you. They don't care about me, except for if we're in their way, and we need to be in their way.
Yeah, I mean, we got to fight the autocracy of the plutocracy. It's my little rap song there. So, but no, thank you so much for having me, Jack. I look
Oh,
forward to
absolutely.
many more conversations. Sorry for the interjections. I'm just getting a little jittery because take
You are
care of
absolutely fine. Yeah, we actually are 10 minutes over, so I completely understand. Hi, I'm Jack, and come back to us next time on FOVA News and follow us on Substack and click the little bell down below. It helps a small channel like us out immensely. Thank you for coming.